Thanks to Marvel Snap data miners, we have our first look at Marvel Snap's upcoming Symbiote season later this year. Let's go ahead and dive on into all of the juicy details of some sweet upcoming designs. Our tentative season pass card for the Symbiote season is Agent Venom, a 2/4 with the on-reveal effect that sets the power of all cards currently in your deck to 4. I have to say, I absolutely love this design. It's very reminiscent of one of my other favorite cards to play in Marvel Snap, which is Bast, who sets the power of all cards in your hand to 3. And I think these two cards are going to go in a lot of the same decks together. Typically, you construct your Bast decks in a way where she's going to be powering up everything that's in your hand. And if Bast is going to be powering up everything that you have, it means Agent Venom is going to be powering up everything that's still inside your deck. From a raw theory perspective, we play Agent Venom on turn 2. That gives us draws on turns 3 through 6, or 4 cards that we're going to have the power ideally increased up to 4. There's a lot of obviously generically good hits for this, such as Iron Man, but you also just have a lot of smaller value things that are cheap cards that are stellar with bigger stat lines. Everything from Sage and Cassandra Nova at the 3 energy slot to something like Hood or Hawkeye or Rocket Raccoon at 1 energy, or even Havoc at 2 energy that turns into a 2/8 on the last turn of the game once Agent Venom pumps it up. I think Agent Venom's a really exciting addition to the game because I think it's going to add an element of consistency to these Bast shells that have felt powerful under the right draw circumstances, but often just don't come together frequently enough to be top tier decks. Having essentially a second enabler for all of our low base power payoffs seems like big game, and I think has the potential to push Bast decks up to the next level. Our first regular card release for the Symbiote season is Scream, a 2/1 with the triggered ability when an enemy card moves, steal 2 power from it once per turn. At face value, Scream is obviously a movement hate card. While dedicated move decks are not particularly great as of the recording of this review, it is noteworthy that they're going to be getting a big boost in September this season before these Symbiote cards come out. So Scream's going to be a kind of organic new card release way to kind of dial back the things from the previous season a touch. I think this card's going to be good outside of that purpose as well, though. Specifically, Jeff the Baby Land Shark and Nocturne are some of the most played cards in Marvel Snap, and Scream effectively takes 4 points of power away from them. It takes 2 directly off your opponent's side and is adding 2 more to your side of the board. Past all of this, your opponent doing stuff that enables Scream, there's also lots of cards in Marvel Snap that allow you to enable Scream directly yourself. Things like Spider-Man, Polaris, Arrow, Juggernaut, Magneto. You mix in a copy of Kraven or Kingpin on our side of the board, and suddenly these cards that are pushing our opponent's cards around are not just disrupting where your opponent deployed their stuff, but they're also giving us added bonuses that can add up to game-winning stats. Well, obviously Scream is a powerful anti-movement card, and you could go hog wild enabling it a ton. I think it's also worth calling out that I think this card is going to be a solid value rate card with minimal enabling. Let's say you play Scream on turn 2, and then the only card that moves is when you Polaris or Spider-Man something on turn 3. This means you'll have effectively gotten 10 points worth of stats out of your 2+3 energy card, which is a solid amount of power given that you're also disrupting your opponent a touch as well. Our next Symbiote release is Misery, a 5/10 with the on-reveal. Repeat the on-reveal abilities of your other cards here and then destroy them. This one feels like a hard card to parse. It's obviously a cheaper and higher power Odin, which is a very powerful playable effect in a number of decks, but it has the very real downside of blowing up the things that it's triggering. One question that will have to be asked as the power level of this card is how exactly does it work with Wong, i.e. when you play Misery out to the Wong path, are you going to get to double up the effects that you're re-triggering, or are they going to get blown away after they happen the first time, not allowing them to happen again? As a a cursory glance at the on-reveal cards in Marvel Snap that you don't mind losing offhand, Misery obviously works very well with Hood, one of my personally favorite cards, and then Ironheart, as well as White Tiger, and maybe Shuri could be other candidates for things that you don't mind having their on-reveal happen for a second time and then blowing them away. At a minimum, if this card ends up being a Hood enabler, I think that's probably pretty reasonable, but it's definitely less flexible than some of the other cards that we've been reviewing today. Our next data mine is Scorn, a 1/2, who has the triggered ability: when you discard this, give its power to one of your cards in play, return this to your hand with +1 power. The big question to be asked about Scorn is, how many times are you going to have to discard her over the course of a game of Marvel Snap to feel like she generated an appropriate amount of useful stats on your board? To give a simple example, let's say you discard her in the early game with something like Colleen Wing, and then you discard her again on turn 5 to MODOK, and then you play her out on the last turn of the game. She'll have given 2 cards at random on your board, +2 and then +3, and then she'll be providing 4 points of power herself, meaning in a way you kind of got 9 stats for 1 energy, which seems like a pretty impressive rate. In comparison, if you only discard her a singular time, she's going to give 2 points at random and then play out as a 1/3, which is not anything super impressive, but 5 points of power for 1 energy also isn't terrible. Cards like Rocket Raccoon do something similar, and they often see play in Snap. Our next card release is definitely the one that I personally am most looking forward to in Toxin, a 3/2 with the on reveal: return your other cards here to your hand. Toxin gets +2 power for each one returned. Those who are familiar with my gameplay content know that I am a huge fan of the bounce archetype. I am super excited to finally have a third enabler for that strategy being added to the game. Since Marvel Snap has been in existence, Beast and Falcon were the only cards we had to send our cheap on-reels back to our hands so we can play them again, and Toxin's going to be changing this dynamic. I think it's also really neat that Toxin can kind of serve a double role in that archetype, since a 3/8 that in theory you could even beast back to your hand and play him out again to scale up into the double digits of power is not only an enabler for our cheap cards, but can also be a payoff as we rotate things in and out of the board back and forth between our hand. Past the obvious applications in a dedicated bounce deck, Toxin also stands to be a reasonable tech card as well. I've often talked about the merits of Beast being an effective counter tool to opposing things like White Widow, or letting you clear out things like the Savage Lands or a pesky ninja that's giving you -2 stats, and Toxin will allow us to do this as well, while also getting larger in the process. Our last data mine from the Symbiote season is Anti-Venom, a 4/6 with the on reveal: set the cost and power of your deck's top card to 0. First things first, if Anti-Venom doesn't finally make Howard the Duck playable, I'm not sure that anything ever will. This card is obviously good with things that already have base 0 power. Things like Iron Man or Arnim Zola or Sage are the first ones that come to mind as reasonable hits. The key really to this is going to be, can you construct your deck in a way where you have more positive hits than negative hits when it comes to making your card free but stripping its stats off it. In a roundabout way of thinking, Anti-Venom is almost Iron Lad adjacent in that it kind of attaches the effects of the top card of your deck to a 4/6, with the caveat that it's going to take up an extra spot on your board and you're going to have to draw it, but that comes with the upside of giving you the information of when that effect is going to happen and which lane on the board it gets deployed to. Overall, Anti-Venom definitely seems like it's a card that's going to have good cube equity, i.e. you know when you're capable of generating a big swing on the last turn of the game, but your opponent is going to be left guessing as to what exactly your output range is for fear of whatever giant 0 energy bomb might be lurking in your hand. Finally, while it's not a Symbiote season card, I would like to call out a different data mine that's coming up sooner that's been updated. Specifically, Wiccan is now a 4/7 who still has the on reveal if you've spent all your energy this game +2 max energy. Obviously, this is strictly better than when he was a 4/5. 5. I assume they want to really encourage people to play this card, so it'll have a reasonable stat line even in the games where you don't get its effect. And either way, I'm still excited to build with him because he's a neat and powerful effect. Overall, Symbiote season looks awesome. I'm super excited by Toxin to give me another bounce enabler, and Agent Venom allowing to be a secondary card that works well in Bass decks is super exciting for me personally. I would love to hear in the comments down below which of these Symbiote cards you're excited to play with when they come around later this year. And as always, if you enjoyed my breakdown on these, be sure to snap that like button and come back again for more with multiple Marvel Snap breakdowns here every week.